people like the first ETA to turn on was the Australian ETA. It's been around since 1996. Canadians still don't know they need it. We knew that there was a value proposition to the traveler.
Okay.
So we incorporated a business and we started trying to figure out how we could legitimately apply for visas and help people out through a tech product.
Right.
Because the incumbents in the space and really the whole industry around helping with people with visas was the service industry.
Okay.
We had our first airlines using the product in 2019.
Wow, that's quick.
It's kind of like hilarious timing, right? Because end of 2019, beginning of 2020, all of a sudden, there's so much attention drawn to this question of like, what do I need to cross a border? Most of the money we raised was during the pandemic period. After the 2008 financial crisis, governments had aggressively moved to keep interest rates artificially low for a long period of time. What this did was it made quote unquote cash free, or it's very easy to raise debt. It was also very hard to make money in any sort of asset that was linked to interest rates.
Right. So
it pushed a lot of money into these riskier asset classes and like primarily venture capital. And at the same time, the benchmark for a lot of VCs was, are you gaining, share of mind for the space? Are you gaining logos? All this different stuff. Revenue was less important. So our idea of like, we're not going to lean into revenue right now. We're going to lean into logo growth. We're going to lean into, a share of mind in the space. And we're not going to focus on revenue. So we raised like $20 million before we had $2 million in revenue. Hi, my name is Max Tremaine. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sherpa. We make it easy for people to cross borders around the world. So we build tools for travel companies, including airlines, to tell travelers what they need to cross a border, get them an eVisas, an ancillary product to their trip, and then basically validate to the carrier that they've got the right documents for their trip. The Canadian success stories that I think everybody is attracted to are people who are in a difficult climate and kind of overcoming obstacles. And, that's just really core to the entrepreneurial experience. You're going to have, if you're lucky, probably at least one existential crisis every month. We wanted to be an amazing global business that was based in Canada, which means taking some of those Canadian values, like being polite, being a good partner to people, that rugged northern perspective. That's all really fun stuff, and I think it's helped us out a lot. So, you've got to be prepared for that just from like a comfort perspective, but then also it's like, that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes people want to join a startup, is that idea that like I can actually make a difference and be a meaningful contributor to the success of this business.
welcome to studio. Welcome to StartWell.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is your first time here, right?
Yeah, it is.
And what so far has been your experience?
It's amazing. It's like we live in like a remote first world. We're a fully remote distributed team. And yet, we put a lot into that kind of magic of getting people together, making the most of those experiences. And I think StartWell is very much aligned with that, where it's like, you're going to get a group together to do something, make the most of it, turn it into, something that you can take away from the event. I think all that's really important. And it seems like a space that's just of that idea.
Nice. You get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I think I keep hearing it time and time again from clients that bring their teams here, that they've had happier days for having experience gathering at this place, because it's designed for that. It's just comfortable, and you can, like you said, the media thing enables people to get a lot of mileage out of that experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of mileage, is that
Very
a good segue?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Sherpa. Okay, so your company. Let's talk about when it was founded. What would you say Sherpa was, and how long ago was that?
Well, before Sherpa was a thing, me and my co-founder Ivan had just had this experience of traveling and having no idea what the requirements to cross a border were.
Okay. You were how old at this point?
This was like early in my career was when it really dug in. It like really stuck out to me, where it's like I would go places and then just have this like feverish experience days before leaving, where people would be like, oh, like, yeah, I remember when I went there, applying for the visa really sucked. And I was like, excuse me? And my co-founder Ivan like had experienced it too, and he was likewise early 20s, running a remote business, traveling around Southeast Asia, and just getting like the border shakedowns, unclear rules, depends who you're talking to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we were just like, man, there's got to be a better way.
Right.
Like that was really the foundation of Sherpa. So Sherpa is a set of tools for travel companies to tell travelers what they need in simple terms, always sourced by a government source and directing people toward the right place to learn more. We sell visas as an ancillary product to a trip, where the value proposition to the traveler is, you're going to use information from your profile, your booking to pre-fill this application. So everything's aligned and it's a very straightforward experience. And then off of the end of that, we're able to tell the operators, hey, this person traveling with these documents on this trip has the right documents for their trip. So it's really solving the problems that we had in our early 20s, which is super cool.
Let's hear an anecdote. Like, is there a particular one where you're like caught between a crocodile and a man with 4 cigarettes in his mouth?
I think Ivan's are definitely worse than mine, because his where he would do these kind of land border crossings, very remote, and on a day-by-day basis, they put up like different prices for the visa on just a blackboard. That's probably more extreme than mine. All of mine are the missing trips, that could have been really important. Like I've never been to China. I think that would have been really cool, but it's just a visa that takes a long time. I was not prepared. So that's upsetting for sure. Yeah. What else?
And you're saying that as a Canadian too.
As a Canadian too.
It's like,
yeah,
pretty good passport to have in terms
absolutely
of visa-less travel, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And I mean, that's something we get to deal with now is we're like early on, most of our users were in Europe. Now it's Europe and North America primarily. We're getting a lot more use in the Middle East and Asia, which is awesome to see, because that's, like you said, probably where our product makes the biggest difference.
Okay, so let's backtrack for a second. You had this pain point of like, oh, we'd like to travel to all these places, and at the same time realize there's a knowledge gap on our manifestation of freedom. Okay, so how did that become a company, and how long ago was this now?
So
it's been a decade or something?
It really started 10 years ago. The summer of 2015 was when we started talking about this and had that there's got to be a better way moment. By the end of that year, we'd incorporated a business so that we could start. We knew that there was a value proposition to the traveler.
Okay.
So we incorporated a business and we started trying to figure out how we could legitimately apply for visas and help people out through a tech product.
Right.
Because the incumbents in the space and really the whole industry around helping with people with visas was a service industry.
Yeah.
And we wanted to build a tech company because we knew that was going to be scalable, low cost. It was just going to be the best way. And
did you both come from tech?
Yeah, we did.
So you're both coders?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I think it's generous to call me a coder, but like would definitely had experience, building at least MVPs and stuff like that. And I previously worked at a fintech company. Ivan was doing design and development through his own digital agency, working with companies building products. So yeah, we both came from that world and just knew that like it's a huge opportunity to go into a space that's all service model, theoretically standardizable work.
Right.
So we're like, wow, this is super interesting. And also like, I mean, I started my career in market research and I just saw that like the proportion of international travelers who needed some sort of visa was growing.
Mm-hmm.
it was a proportion that had shrunk during the 90s. There was this kind of shift toward visa openness, but 1996, Australia had a specific use case, like a real problem for them, where people would fly from London or New York to Melbourne or Sydney and, be held up in customs, for legitimate reasons. There are good reasons for customs to turn people away. And they'd have to fly the whole day to get home. So they said, all right, well, let's front load some of our customs process using modern technology. So they introduced the Australian ETA, which became kind of the benchmark and I guess the front.
ETA stands for
electronic travel authorization.
Okay.
So it's telling you, based on our information, if you show up, we're not going to turn you away right away. And if you don't get your ETA, it doesn't mean you can't travel there. It just means you have to go to an embassy or consulate to, get yourself figured out, which is nice from the perspective of it's better than flying all the way.
Yeah, but still a pain in the ass.
Wherever, it's still a pain in the ass for sure. But it's less of a pain in the ass for both parties. Like it's less of a pain in the ass for the government because, it costs a lot of money in airport to do all of this like customs screening and stuff like that, immigration screening, whatever it is. And then it costs less for the traveler because they're getting like much more definitive information on whether they can travel before they actually take the trip. You think like it's always a bad experience. It's a better experience to be told you can't travel ahead of your trip than to do, the whole flight there and be told like, no, I'm not letting you in.
Like shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a few moments like that when I was younger where like policies would change. So as a Canadian who lived in Africa, I lived in East Africa in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. There was a lot of change happening, right? It was like the second president of the country ever.
Yeah.
And not democratic.
Yeah.
It was a push to move towards, a trade-based economy as opposed to a handout kind of economy.
Yeah.
And I remember like we would arrive at customs, my brother and I, after like a summer in Canada visiting our cousins.
Yeah.
And you're at the customs desk or whatever upon arrivals. They're sitting up there.
Yeah.
It's one of those old school ones where they're like the magistrate up there.
Yeah.
They're handing your passport. You're a little kid.
Literally from on high.
And you're kind of freaked out already. And then they're like, it's going to cost you $200 US. And we're like, but we spent all our money in Canada. We don't have any money. How can you travel with no money? We live here.
Yeah.
And then what do you do? We've been locked up before.
Yeah.
Had to like bribe a guy with just a little bit of money that we had to go call someone to get someone to come.
Yeah.
Dramas.
Oh yeah, for sure. But anyway, like this basically kicked off a wave of this idea that like I'm going to impose broader requirements on travelers before they travel. They're going to be simpler. Like there's a move away from the paper-based travel visas that people have to go and apply for at an embassy or consulate toward, a not a framework, but a standard of this kind of e-visa.
Sure. Yeah.
Lots more e-visas and many more ETAs for people who are technically visa exempt. So we're going from a world where, there was this shift toward like truly visa-free travel to a shift toward a world where like most travelers were actually going to need to apply for or register to something before they travel. So those two things, like just knowing that it was a bad experience and having the insight that this is an experience that's bad enough and kind of anxiety ridden enough that people were willing to pay for someone to help them with it, and knowing that we weren't just building into this stagnant market, but there was this wave we were going to be able to ride as we were building the tool.
That's exciting.
It all was very neat for us as like, at this point, I guess we were like 25, 26. And
so you're not thinking about downside at that point anyway.
Absolutely not.
Right. So
no
like
kid, no kids,
no mortgage,
no mortgage. And we're just like, yeah, this is, what excited us was I think two things. Like we had been told and we'd seen like, being in the kind of startup world, we'd seen this kind of, pattern of people who kind of fall in love with a technology or a solution and just kind of like try to ram it into a market. So we love that idea of like fall in love with a problem, not a solution, and then just like see where the market takes you was a big thing.
Yeah.
And then the second
That's smart.
was building something that couldn't be replicated in a weekend.
Okay.
Where it's like, it was a difficult solution to build no matter what it was going to be. There are regulatory constraints. There are all kinds of, difficult to understand processes. It was a big data problem at a time when big data was like a really big thing for people to worry about. So it was on trend in a lot of ways. It was
technically
neat.
A decade ago.
Yeah.
Like, what was the tech stack that you were building on anyway?
The tech stack we were building on was not entirely different than whenever anyone else was building. We made some decisions early on to like focus on JavaScript, which is nice because it was, even back then, NPM was huge. Everybody loved NPM. I think people do to a certain extent still.
Node package manager?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's like we could build everything in JavaScript, which is great. We love that idea. We were building on these kind of modern cloud platforms so that we could like host things without having to worry too much about infrastructure and stuff like that. Like there are arguments for and against that, but it was not that the infrastructure or the code was super specific, but the use case was super specific.
Right.
Of like, I've got to go out and keep track of, all of this like rapidly and widely changing environment. I have to be able to work with a system that is highly structured, but not documented. So like the engineering problem that we solve is what's called black boxing. You're interacting with a black box. You have to see how it works. You have to try not to upset the black box while you're kind of testing with it and stuff like that. So it's a really neat engineering problem, but we were able to use modern tech to solve it, which is great. We've been building it 10 years earlier and we were building it on, Java or like, even non-web, technologies, it would have been pretty difficult. So we were lucky that we were at a time when the technology wave was like highly flexible and oriented toward building quickly.
Because part of this is the technical challenge of, aggregating and updating policy.
Yeah.
And then the communication with the verification systems all over the world that issue visas, right?
Yes.
And do they have APIs? Is that something that you guys created?
We have to build all of the systems that go out and apply for visas ourselves. Like usually the governments will have policies for third parties applying for visas on people's behalf.
Like travel agencies.
Okay. Yeah, travel agencies. People get the corporate assistants to apply for visas for them. There's a well-established kind of body of law around applying for a visa on someone's behalf. But there's not a technical infrastructure for it.
Right.
So we have to build the systems that go out and apply for people's visas. And we have to build integrations on both sides because like the best experience for getting a visa is no experience. So you don't want to build a tool that pulls people into a process where like, I need to go apply for this visa through all these steps. The best experience is it's built in to American Airlines and Delta and like whoever else into their actual systems where someone can go through the experience and see that opportunity to apply for the visa where all of the data to apply for that visa already exists. It's like I've already got the passport info, I've already got the flight information, and I just need to kind of collect a few pieces of information. I've probably also got an emergency contact, stuff like that. So you've already got all this info. You just apply for the visa in a much more straightforward way. We knew that was the great experience. So we have to build on one hand integration systems to interact with the government,
right,
and on the other hand integration systems to interact with
booking
systems, the airline. So it's
so specifically airlines, not like online travel agencies like Expedia and stuff.
Oh, OTAs use it too.
Okay.
So it's used broadly throughout the travel ecosystem. So our product is used by OTAs, TMCs, which are like corporate agencies and stuff like that. Like in town here, like Flight Center would be a big one for that. They have a part of the company called Corporate Traveler that deals with company travel. They're a partner of ours. Yeah. Also, like travel tech broadly, like Airbnb uses the product in some straightforward ways, just flag to travelers whether they need something.
So wait.
Yeah.
How big is the company today? Like how many people work for you?
We have 40 people.
Yeah.
But we apply for thousands of visas a day.
And are you the premier kind of, let's call it, in your category, or the
Yes.
premier solution?
The premier solution for sure. Like we have millions of travelers using our product every week.
At what point were you able to say that sentence?
How
many years did it take?
So a major inflection point for us was COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's funny, like we released our first integration.
So for everyone else, it was like an oh shit moment. And for you guys, it was like exciting.
It was a time to shine for sure. Because it was a time to shine is the way I describe it. Because like, if you think about it, like we had released our first product for integration in like late 2018.
Okay.
We had our first airlines using the product in 2019.
Wow, that's quick.
It's kind of like hilarious timing, right? Because end of 2019, beginning of 2020, all of a sudden, there's so much attention drawn to this question of like, what do I need to cross a border?
Mm-hmm.
You know, lots of things are happening. Obviously, there's the global pandemic and all this different stuff. But all of a sudden, every single travel company, whatever type of travel company, is struggling to answer the question, like, where can I take people? What do they need to cross this border?
Mm-hmm.
And like, how am I going to help them with it? So, you know, there were two options for us. One was like, we're focused on the visas. Let's stay focused on the visas and like, you know, take a step back until we get to a more regular world. Or there is this opportunity to say, we're going to, you know, our mission as a company is to make it easy to cross borders.
Sure.
So we're going to look at this changing environment and say, that's our mission. Right now, it's more difficult to cross borders than ever. So we're going to address this problem. And there wasn't a clear revenue opportunity, right? Because like all of a sudden, every travel company has less money to spend on IT products. But at the same time, they have this like really profound need. So our model basically was, let's use this opportunity to be helpful in tough times for the whole industry. Let's build an amazing amount of goodwill, name recognition, and what have you. And then, you know, in that post-pandemic period, whenever it happens, we're going to have both those things to be a stronger player in the market.
So how did you do it?
So the way we did it was, well, it was already a tech product that was tracking, you know, border requirements. So we just pointed all of the tools that we built, that were built to track what are the passport requirements, what are the visa requirements. And, you know, this is tracking signals to change, right? It's like we're looking at government systems. We're looking at quasi-government systems like NOTAM and stuff like that. We're looking at all these like, you know, notification system, streams of information, whatever it is. Even like static sources and change logs and stuff like that. You know, are there coming changes to requirements in all of these different systems? So we pointed those systems. I think we went to an amazing amount of sources. Like we were already tracking loads and loads of sources, hundreds of thousands. And we just like tracked many, many more. So multiples of that more, but pointed to health requirements, basically. And pretty quickly, within a couple of months, we had a very robust system for telling travelers what their health requirements were. And then, thank you.
Yeah.
And then likewise, kind of helping them figure out how they were going to get all of this different stuff. We weren't selling like, you know, COVID testing. We weren't selling like the kind of like certificates and stuff like that, because from a revenue standpoint, you know, it was going to be quite limited anyway.
Sure.
And if not in volume, just in time. Yeah. Like you said, this is not a long-term revenue opportunity, where the main opportunity here was the goodwill. So it's like lean into the goodwill.
Absolutely.
You know, like
the brand equity piece quickly.
As a founder, I think you got to think about scale. Like if we were trying to build a low scale business, which is not a bad thing, if we wanted to build like a small company around doing like the kind of COVID testing and stuff like that, would have been a good time for it. But, you know, you have to have a real clear and realistic view of how you're going to scale that business.
Right.
Where if we wanted to build over the long term, the primary company in the world for helping people cross borders, and we weren't going to do that by charging people for figuring out their COVID certificate. We were going to do that by building a integrator base of travel companies that were, you know, excited about the problem we were solving and appreciative of how we were able to do it. And that's what we got during the COVID period. We went from 2 airlines to 20 in like a year and a half, which was insane growth for an airline tech product.
Talking about the business model in the beginning, what was your revenue stream then? How did you make money from day one?
It hasn't changed loads. Like we make it easy for someone to apply for a visa, and we charge them $5 to $20 for it.
Okay.
You know, that's always, it's been like a really simple revenue model from the start. And I think there's a real strength to that model because you have a customer who you have to do right by. You know, you don't have to do anything fancy or strange with their data to make money. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with an targeted ad supported model, but we weren't going to find a targeted ad supported model based on like visa information, because a lot of that personal information is like the most protected personal information. So you can't do, strange and unexpected stuff with that data. People feel really, justifiably would feel quite, strange about that. So we said, we want them to be our customers where they're getting a value out of the service that we're selling, as this tech-enabled service. And then we want our integrator to be a partner, where it's like the integrators, likewise, like, coming from selling software to banks to selling software to airlines, I was moving from like polar opposite spaces. Banks have sprawling IT budgets. Whenever they're considering a product, they consider loads of different alternatives. When they turn it on, it's tracked very finely what the ROI they're getting out of the product is. Airlines have quite small IT budgets for the size of business because, they just are very low margin businesses by the, nature of what they sell. Huge fixed costs, huge, variable costs, and very competitive pricing. So, they consider deeply what products they're using, but they don't have a lot of alternatives generally because it's not like there's not a load of money to be had there. So there just aren't loads and loads of companies. Tends to be very like, top loaded too. There are a few large companies that do a lot of stuff for airlines, which is fine, but it's a space where you can come in as a new company and very quickly get a lot of name recognition because there's just not a lot in the space. So that was very neat. And that helped us.
I have to ask because like there's a lot of rhetoric, especially in startup ecosystem, right? Like, where I think, and particularly in Canada, I feel like entrepreneurs start by looking over their shoulder unless they're like massively venture capitalized. And then they're still kind of mistrustful of, their ability to pay back the money that they've earned in some way.
Sure.
So the question of infinite scale. So to start with, I guess a question about you guys is it a bootstrap company?
No, it's not.
You took on
we're VC backed. Yeah.
The other question is about this, I guess what recommendations can you give or any advice from this experience to other founders that might be watching this and starting something new about having confidence in market and anything that, from those first few years, let's call it like the first half of the last decade. When you started winning market and you said, this is great. We've done the testing, we've figured it out, and it makes sense that we are the company that people should turn to.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of getting confidence in market, like when you first start building a company and feeling out whether you should get investors, people will, of course, ask you for a financial model. Yeah. And at first, it feels like a very academic process and kind of needless. But then
it's hypothetical.
Because it's hypothetical. But then you dig in with the right people and they say, well, give me what you think you could reasonably do in this space. How quickly you think you could move based on the existing, marketing dynamics, based on what other like type companies have been able to do. I want to see what your unit economics are, with reasonable estimates. I want to see what you think, what type of growth curve you think is achievable based on the network effects that you think you're going to have.
Yeah.
And then you kind of clue in that like, oh, this is actually like a really important management document. And the way that I say it to founders generally is like, you've got to really have solid confidence in that model, because the worst thing you can have as a founder is investors who are not aligned toward the company's trajectory generally.
And to that end, also, I would add this personally, and I don't know if you agree with me, that a lot of founders, especially if they are seeking capital, right, from investors, they don't think of themselves as the major investor in their company.
Yeah.
So that's part of this, is that you want to be answerable to yourself for being able to rely on your model and have faith in it, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's like, if you're aligned with your investors toward like, I'm going to give this a shot, and then like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's great. But if you're trying to build something that you think is going to be meaningful to you, even if you take a kind of longer term, process toward it, that's great. You just don't want people involved who have a different, need and long-term view than you do, for sure.
Of course.
And I think like another thing that's really underappreciated, I think it was underappreciated because of the ZERP era and like how easy it was to get money. Like when you are a founder taking on capital investment, you're making choices to deploy that capital toward achieving your financial model. Like you have a fiduciary duty to your investors to do that. And like, in the startup space, you're not going to be like chased down by lawyers if you don't do like a fantastic job deploying capital.
Yeah.
It's not like other kind of, industries where you're a capital manager, so to speak. But, it's still meaningful for you. You have relationships with all these people, like, they're going to vouch for you or not vouch for you in whatever you do next. Like, it's something you should take seriously.
So, pair now this capitalization story and the history of raises with the company against your growth of market share.
Yeah. So most of the money we raised was during the pandemic period.
Okay.
And remember, like that was the pandemic period overlapped with like the heat of the end of the ZERP era.
What era are you saying?
Zero interest rate policy era or paradigm era. Like after the 2008 financial crisis, governments had aggressively moved to keep interest rates, artificially low for a long period of time. What this did was it made quote unquote cash free, or it's very easy to raise debt. It was also very hard to make money in any sort of asset that was linked to interest rates.
Right.
So it pushed a lot of money into these riskier asset classes and like primarily venture capital.
Yep.
So there was loads and loads of money. If you were a founder going out and raising money, people took their jobs seriously, but it just drove, valuations and prices up. So for us, we were in this position, like I said, beginning of the pandemic, we had a couple of reference users of the product, which was great. We had successful visa applications that we were doing. We were successfully informing people effectively about their visa requirements. And at the same time, the benchmark for a lot of VCs was, are you gaining, share of mind for the space? Are you gaining logos? All this different stuff. Revenue was less important. So our idea of like, we're not going to lean into revenue right now. We're going to lean into logo growth. We're going to lean into, a share of mind in the space. And we're not going to focus on revenue. So we raised like $20 million before we had $2 million in revenue. So which was not unusual at the time. Like that would not be like a headline at the time for that type of company. So yeah, we had good capital.
But you didn't light it on fire. Your idea was
exactly
use that money
we used it
prudently.
It's generous to say that we used it prudently, but we used it effectively toward gaining market share. Yeah, where it's like we had a lot of companies using the product now, and we were doing right by them. We were building a product that worked. So, we had to have engineers, we had to have people that were going out and evangelizing the space, because there was not, before us, what airlines were doing generally is they were giving these static disclaimers to travelers.
Yeah, it was more advisory.
Which is a good thing to do, but it was like
function.
Little red box that says, hey, you've just booked an international trip. It's your responsibility to make sure that you have the right documents before traveling.
Right.
Which is better than nothing, but it was not much. And what we were going out evangelizing was, this is a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to delight the traveler, to, make sure that operationally you don't have this big risk of people showing up without the right documents. And then also it's a revenue opportunity too. Mm-hmm. So we had this amazing sales process running. We had this great engineering, team running, making sure that we could actually fulfill what we were selling. So we deployed that capital, maybe not prudently, but certainly effectively.
Yeah. You had strategy for how you're spending your money.
Totally right. Yeah.
This is interesting too. I'm sure for a lot of listeners that are considering building out sales teams for B2B sales, especially this kind of like enterprise, net new relationship formation. So what lessons can you offer for that side to your business? Things that you learned, and also things that have changed in the last few years?
Well, I mean, there has always been this idea, and I think even now there's this idea that I'm going to hire a bunch of people and they're going to do really effective work. Of course, AI has changed that considerably, but I don't think that's ever been true. Like hiring a lot of people
to knock on doors.
Yeah, or just hiring a lot of people broadly to do anything is not going to increase your output considerably on any short time scale. Yeah. Like if you go out and hire, like there's always this pressure where it's like, I've got all this money now, I'm going to go hire a bunch of people and that's going to increase our output and effectiveness drastically. Like that's a pipe dream. Mm-hmm. That's never happening. Like, the biggest, all of the biggest inflection points around the business, you can trace back to like having a really good person working on that thing with a lot of ownership and independence. Yeah. And like a really effective infrastructure around them so that when they're able to build something, they can do it without having to like go get other people to do things. And this is on the product side and on the sales side, where it's like I, as a salesperson, know our value proposition. I can see where it's being used effectively. And, I know who I'm going around to and selling this product to. That's a huge amount of leverage for a salesperson. Right. And one salesperson who has that kind of support behind them does a lot better than going out and hiring a whole team of SDRs and AEs to go, knock on people's doors, like you said. Targeted, focused, with well-resourced people make a huge difference. And to answer your question, like this is more true with the new paradigm of technology. So like AI lets you put more into, highly independent and well-resourced people to do an effective job. You get more leverage on people now, which is extreme to building this.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about current state. I guess is one thing we can come back to, which is that early, I had that question around tech stack.
Yes.
So artificial intelligence, we got to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has it changed your back office?
It's changed everything.
Okay.
It's like the best metaphor that I think that I still hold to is like you have the world's most energetic intern at your demand to basically in 1 minute spend a year worth of time on something and give you an answer based on no technical experience, but access to lots and lots of information.
Right.
Which is unbelievable. It's like you can deploy that, keen intern toward anything. You can't really expect like strategic thinking Like the way that people talk about AI scale now, they're like, this intern is going to turn into a kind of, seasoned expert by throwing more data at it or more process and stuff like that. I'm not an expert myself, but I just don't really see that, because like the way you go from being an intern to an expert in something is not looking at more information.
Right.
Generally, it's like, understanding the kind of like, and it's a moving target, understanding all of the, dynamics of an industry, a space, a type of technology, all this different stuff. And, being able to make projections and associations between things to solve problems strategically. It's not impossible that could happen, at some point in time through some sort of AI technology. But what we have now is more powerful than that in some ways, because of the like just speed and broad applicability of these tools.
Right.
But it's less powerful in the way that like, you still look at stuff that's vibe coded, and you're like at a certain level of complexity or a certain, need, when you have a certain need for like design before work, a lot of things fall down.
Sure.
Extremely powerful tools that we use a lot in our development, but then also in our operations generally. Like we have everything hooked up so that we can get as much context into our LLMs as possible, so that we can like solve real day-by-day business cases and get real drafts together for things. It hugely increases speed and like your leverage on people. So you're able to get a lot more output out of things. And like ultimately over the long term, like if we get more and more leverage out of people, we're just going to grow and grow and grow as a business. So,
but in terms of the actual product offering,
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
it's baked in. It's helping. In
absolutely,
terms of like,
it is. So I'll give an example. You asked about back office. So in terms of like our systems that apply for visas, for example, because we build the systems that interact with the governments, every time a government makes a change to their system and their process, we have to react to that change.
Right.
We have to go reassess the system, figure out how we're going to deal with it in some new way. Of course, we always look at like the regulations, and it's like, okay, we can't really do this anymore. We got to do it this way. All that different stuff. On average, this used to take about 2 weeks for us to react to a government change. Generally, it was a big cost. Right now, whenever there's any government change, we spot it much earlier because of AI, but then we solve it extremely quickly, because a lot of that assessment work that would go on before a lot of the actual work of like solving the problem, and then a lot of the like, hands-on work of like actually like changing our system to interact with it differently. So like the initial documentation and all that stuff, and then like the kind of meaty process stuff that's not like the kind of design decision-making stuff like that. Because we're able to pull that down so much, we've had as little as 2 hours downtime. 2 weeks to 2 hours is pretty amazing.
Massive performance.
Average is probably still a bit higher than that, but 2 hours was kind of amazing.
Yeah. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yes. So that's one example.
Yeah.
Like
That's a great example.
And then also it's like, wherever errors come up, another like really big thing, one engineer on our team worked on this. And it was great. You interact with so many systems that give like ambiguous or like lengthy error codes and stuff like that. And like just having a system that's able to go in and make a pretty quick assessment of like where the error is actually coming from. All of our systems follow a flow on the application side. And at every like line in that flow, there's an opportunity for error. That generally would lead into like an errors bucket for assessment. Now it leads into an LLM to give a realistic assessment of like what this error actually is. And in some cases they can propose solutions too. So it's like these flow charts become more expansive, but also like much easier to interact with.
Cool.
So like there are two examples of how like in our visa back office, these systems have improved drastically. On the actual like software engineering side, yeah, we want to use whatever the best new tool is for helping write good code. Yeah, I still see that kind of like separation between like the architecture and what's actually written being different. Like there are real decisions that need to be made when you're designing anything based on trade-offs.
Sure.
Like everything has trade-offs. And like, you know, LLMs generally can help really well with understanding those trade-offs, or at least giving you a pretty good grounding, which you kind of have to build on yourself. But then it's like, sure, you can give a lot of the context in there, but it's like, do you really trust a system that is going for like the average best answer for things to really kind of, you know, dissect well what your context is and make decisions for you? It's generally not the case. And that's why a lot of vibe coding of just like, I want this, that, and the other leads to some like funny, you know, it's funny kind of like
depression, anxiety,
mistakes that you just wouldn't make. Yeah.
It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because it's like, I mean, I'm sure all this stuff will get very, very, very good.
I'm not bearish on the tooling, but I feel like I'm also not, you know, I don't know, like I don't have like unreasonable expectations. I don't think for like the upside or the downside of it. I think it's enormously powerful for people. It's an amazing tool for learning, for everyone, you know, to have this like amazing advisor / intern with just unbounded, you know, excitement and access to information is unbelievable. But at the same time, like there are going to be clear limits. And that's great because like ultimately I think the kind of where a lot of people are landing on this is like, I need really good people to get the most out of these tools.
Definitely. And it's about workflows, right? It's like if the workflow, if they are tools and you treat them like tools, even if they're super expeditious and low cost, you still have to use them to an output and assess the value of the output and so on. But it's very exciting times to have them at your disposal.
It's amazing. Yeah, this could not be a better time to be an entrepreneur than right now. A lot of the systems that people rely on are kind of collapsing around us. There's this like, you know, amazing, you know, government debt load around the world that is just kind of coming to a fever pitch. So a lot of the systems people rely on are going away, and they're going to be more reliant on, people are going to be more reliant on each other, you know, and like, you know, private systems and businesses. While at the same time, you've got this amazing improvement in productivity. It's like the absolute best time to be an entrepreneur.
Speaking of timing and climates and the kind of like macro lens on things, given that you're in the business of enabling global freedom, freedom of movement, what's your take, or perhaps it's even data grounded as an answer? In the last year, of course, with fluidity in global politics, what have you guys been seeing as Sherpa in terms of movement of travelers around the world? And how have interests, at least in the last year, changed for vacationing? And even if there's insights that you have for business travel?
Yeah. In terms of like, so there's like the Sherpa angle to this, which is like that idea I was talking about earlier of like global openness. So we're going from in the time that Sherpa has existed, we're going from a world where 7% of all international air travelers need an eVisa or ETA for their trip to next year, well, it'll be more than half. That's an amazing shift.
Wow. In 1 decade.
Yes.
That is crazy.
It's a huge difference.
Needing an eVisa or needing a visa?
eVisa or ETA.
Okay, so idea is that
visa exempt travelers that need some sort of pre-registry. So in some respects, basically a visa, although those people are still visa exempt, they're not being declined the ability to be in the country, but they are being, you know, put through some sort of advanced vetting process if they're not getting an ETA. Or an eVisa, which is a visa that's online. Right. So, and importantly, to that kind of distinction, the proportion of visa exempt travelers is also going down. Like very often when a government turns on an e-visa, they'll apply it to more travelers
regions.
inbound.
Yeah.
Because it's a much cheaper system to operate.
Yeah. Visa's become a more efficient revenue stream.
Yeah. Revenue stream. Yeah, revenue stream's a bit cynical. They are certainly, the systems pay for themselves. Like there's no government that is having their domestic tax-paying population pay for these systems.
Yeah.
They're generally paid for with the fees that you pay. Like if you're traveling into Canada, it's like about 20 Canadian dollars to pay for our ETA system. It's certainly a self-sufficient system. There are other visa systems where it's like hundreds of dollars to apply for the visa. Those certainly are generating revenue for those governments. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
But they serve a legitimate purpose. It's the domain of government to protect their borders, look at who's traveling inbound, assess whether they're a threat to the nation and its populace. Yeah.
As your team is remote, it's primarily Canadian or it's geo-dispersed?
Extremely dispersed. If you asked about like traveler flows too, traveler flows change all the time. Yeah, there's kind of the Trump effect right now. A lot of people aren't traveling to the States as much. There's a general like fear, and then distaste. I don't know, whatever it is. It'll be certainly temporary. Like America is an amazing destination, lovely people, so it's not going to be a long-term effect that people don't travel to the States. And there are always new destinations for people to travel to. The stands, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, were like cool off the beaten path destinations that even now are becoming like more common places for people to travel. Likewise, super interesting culture, unbelievable food. Like if you're a meat dumpling fan, it's just like, the
Heaven for
best place to travel in the world. And then, yeah, like North Africa has always got like new places for people to travel to, even new cities, or just obviously not new cities, amazing historical cities that are becoming bigger destinations for tourists. For business travel is more driven by, market trends broadly. But all of these systems apply to business travelers too.
Right.
So it's like if you're a TMC or like a corporate travel manager, this space is becoming just more important for you. Of like, I could have assumed, a generation or less than that, like you said, 10 years ago, that if I'm like managing a team that's based here in Toronto, they're just like not going to run into a lot of these issues. But now you really should be like, you should have a system that really checks to make sure that you're good to travel, because it's highly disruptive. Yeah, it's a low cost to check and apply for visas ahead of time. It's an amazing risk to not check.
We see it with global teams that are meeting in Toronto and convening in Toronto.
Yeah.
With the shift post-pandemic in the last 5-6 years towards remote work and distributed workforces. Yeah, there's a lot of considerations. It's about flight paths. It's about visa applicabilities.
Yeah.
You don't want half your team.
ETAs too. Like Canada, we turned on our ETA system in 2016.
Okay.
Basically like parity with the US system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the government did like an honest job of trying to let people know, but like, how are you going to inform the whole world that this new ETA program exists? And yeah, there was a lot of confusion, some chaos around like people just not having this new required document. Since then, governments have generally changed tack to where they turn something on. It is available, but not mandatory for a period of time. You saw this in like Korea and the UK. Where it's like the UK ETA turned on beginning of last year. It goes into enforcement beginning of this year. It's a whole year basically of time where it was not enforced, but it was required. So that's good. That gets people prepared and used to a thing and creates less chaos. But like if you're a corporate travel manager, you can't like really afford to be out on any of this stuff. If you're a tourist, you risk your trip not having all of this stuff. Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations in your crystal ball for Canadian travelers in general?
Yeah.
For the next year?
The Canadian passport's likely to continue to be quite strong. That said, these ETAs can apply for anywhere. Like people people like the first ETA to turn on was the Australian ETA. It's been around since 1996. Canadians still don't know they need it. Many. A lot of people I talk to where it's like, oh yeah, I'm planning this trip to Australia. I'm like, oh, make sure you get your ETA. And it's like, excuse me? It's like right. The fact that you need to pre-register for this thing before you go on your trip is generally still a mystery for a lot of people. So, and that's going to continue, and there are these new programs popping up all the time. They're confusing overlap between programs too. Like this year, 2026, India, Thailand, and one other nation are all turning on new arrival cards, which is a separate system than like the eVisa for those countries.
Okay.
But it's like it's a good name. It is a card you need for arrival. But there are all these like things that you need as a Canadian traveler that might not be visas, but they're like extra little things that you need to put together for your trip.
And of course, Sherpa is the place to find out about.
Sherpa's the place to find out about them. And your advice for Canadians is like, or you're like, the foresight I can give is that these things are becoming more popular, not less, generally.
So travelers should keep an eye out for changing policy.
Yeah.
And be aware of what they need to prepare for.
Yeah, but like I've had the benefit of traveling a lot in my role. And yeah, it never ceases to surprise me how different places are than like my preconception of those places. Yeah, like we're lucky to work with, a couple companies in Saudi, for example. And you go there and see like offices teaming with women doing even like leadership work. And you're like, wow, that's very different than my like preconception of this place. And that's like a tiny example of like, if you're a Canadian, you should not be afraid to travel to places based on your preconception of those places. And you should be like prepared for the documentation generally.
I was once crossing a border, probably in 1994, from, I think it was Kenya into Uganda, a land border.
Yeah.
And, we went through the queue and my family all had Canadian passports. So it was okay. They were like stamping us. Okay, whatever. What are you coming here for? Why? No problem. Okay. And then the Swiss, there was this unfortunate Swiss family behind us. And they pulled the father into the queue. Then they pulled him out of the queue and into a private room.
Yeah.
And he got shaken down miserably.
Wow.
And he had to give up thousands of dollars.
Yikes.
because the border officials were like, these guys are rich. They're from Switzerland.
Yeah.
So the Canadian passport can open doors.
It's funny.
But also is a signature of middle-class status,
It's funny.
Which is really funny. I don't know if that's still the case.
That's a good thing or a bad thing.
A long time ago. It was a pleasure spending some time chatting with you, man.
Yeah, likewise.